do. It might be why they fought with you. You ask me, will I now put myself to the side and love other people like you do? Love them like they might be you. When you gave your only son, you showed a love I can't refuse. So I'm gonna give it back to you. Gonna be the change that I know you can use. You have given me so much, and now you ask me what I'll do. So I'm gonna give it back to you. Gonna be the change that I know you can use.
So I'll start learning to speech, start learning to live like you teach, so others can be made brand new and help the world around them too. Could I be a part of the way, Jesus, that you can bring meaningful change? The world will see the good you do and give the glory back to you.
When you gave your only son, you showed a love I can't refuse. So I'm gonna give it back to you. Gonna be the change that I know you can. You have given me so much, and now you ask me what I'll do. So I'm gonna give it back to you. Gonna be the change that I know you can. That I know you can do. You can take all that I am and show me as you will. To see the world around me like my neighborhood.
See the world around me as you go.
Wrap my arms around the hurting and misunderstood. Love 'em like they're living in my neighborhood. Love your neighbor, love your neighbor, love your neighbor like they were your savior. Love your neighbor, love your neighbor, love your neighbor like they weren't a stranger. Love your neighbor, love your neighbor, love your neighbor like they were your savior. Love your neighbor like they weren't a stranger. Like they weren't a stranger. You can take all that I am and show me as you will. See the world around me like my neighborhood. See the world. Gonna wrap my arms around the hurting and misunderstood. Love 'em like they're living in my neighborhood. Love your neighbor, love your neighbor, love your neighbor like the way you see. Wanna give you all I am, get the change for me. Love 'em like they're living in my neighborhood.
Always taking care for good. What I do won't add to what you've done. When you came and gave your perfect life for us, no way that I ever could understand the sacrifice of love. So I place my hope and trust in you. Carve your plans upon my heart and assure me of the things to come. So in everything I will hold on to the hope I found in you. God, I know you're faithful and your promises go on. Though I may not see the plans you have for me, even when I'm weak, I know that Jesus, you are strong. So I keep on holding on. Oh, you gotta keep on holding on. Keep on holding on. thinking of you, and I wanna be wherever you are. Can you light the way and show me where you lead? So I will know the truth. Where I go, I feel you're never too far from me. I will hold on to the hope I found in you. God, I know you're faithful and your promises go on. Though I may not see the plans you have for me, even when I'm weak, I know that Jesus, you are strong. So I keep on holding on. Yeah, yeah. When you can't feel it, and when you can't see it, you gotta keep on holding on. Yeah, you gotta keep on holding on.
I was drowning, letting the world in around me. I was fighting with fear when you found me, but you called me alive and opened my eyes to a new way of life. So amazing, with incredible love you have saved me. Despite the things that I've done, you embrace me. Now I don't have to hide, there's hope in my life when I thought it had died. Because you make me come alive. It's your love that set my heart right. You make me come alive. It's your love that brings the whole world back to life. That brings the whole world. When I feel worthless, you tell me that I have a purpose, that you've given your son and I'm worth it. When I stand face to face with all my mistakes, so you show me his grace. So I trust you are good and you're for me. I'm more than the words the world calls me. I'm replacing the lies with your word for my life that I've hidden inside. Because you make me come alive. It's your love that set my heart right. You make me come alive. It's your love that brings the whole world back to life.
Hey friends, welcome to Church Online. My name's Pastor Luke and I'm the pastor here at Journey Church. And today we've got this combined service with Gracegate and with Journey and a special message with Pastor Cody planned for you. We're in this series in this brand new part of the year of 2021 called the Faith Challenge. I believe that for you and for me and for us collectively as a church together, that God is challenging us to step out in faith. And I believe that today what Pastor Cody's going to be preaching and speaking is going to speak right to where you and I are at in our lives and pump us full of faith in God for what the future has in store for us. So as we sing in these next few moments with the team and as Pastor Cody preaches, I want to encourage you, take this moment to lean in, try to do the best you can to shut out all of the distractions at home or abroad or wherever you're watching from, and let's lean into the presence of God. I'm so grateful for our time together. I want to remind you that we are meeting in person. So if you are in the area and you feel comfortable, come on in, stop by. We're here at the Gracegate Community Church location for the next few weeks until we get into our brand new location, and I am so excited for what God has in store for us. With that, I'm going to pray. Let's get into church together. Father, in the name of Jesus, we give this time to you. We dedicate this moment of our lives to seeking after you, to leaning into your presence. So Lord, would you come inhabit our spaces wherever we might be, together collectively as a church, as we put our eyes and fix our eyes on Jesus Christ, the author and finisher of our faith. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Let's worship together.
To the limit, I'm at the end of myself. I see the edge, but I know below me your love is waiting to catch. I'm falling into you, 'cause no one's gonna love me like you do. I've got nothing to lose, so I can't stop, won't stop falling into you. The rush I felt in the free fall, 'cause I lost control of my life. Jesus, the fact that you've always had me, your love is never in doubt. I wanna love it like you love me, I wanna love it like you love me. I'm falling into you, 'cause no one's gonna love me like you do. I've got nothing to lose, so can't stop, won't stop falling into you. I wanna love it like you love me, wanna love it like you love me. Oh yeah, yeah, I'm falling into you, 'cause no one's gonna love me like you do, you do. voice dies down, Lord, speak to me now. You have all my attention. I will linger and listen. I can't miss a thing. Lord, I know my heart wants more of you. My heart wants something new, so I surrender all. And all I want is to live within your love, being done by who you are. My desire is to know you deeper, Lord. I will open up again, throw my fears into the wind. I am desperate for a touch of heaven. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're the fire in the morning. You're the cool in the evening. The breath in my soul. Oh, the life in my bones. There is no hesitation in your love and your affection. It's the sweetest of all. Lord, I know my heart wants more of you. My heart wants something new, so I surrender all. And all I want is to live within your love, being done by who you are. My desire is to know you deeper, Lord. I will open up again, throw my fears into the wind. I am desperate for a touch of heaven. Jesus, have your way in me now. Open up my heart to you. Open up my heart to you now. So do what only you can. So Jesus, have your way in me now. I open up my heart to you. I open up my heart to you now. So do what only you can. Jesus, have your way in me now. All I want is to live within your love, being done by who you are. My desire is to know you. Oh Lord, I will open up again, throw my fears into the wind. I am desperate for a touch
As you breathe, we live and have our being. When you speak, oh, I feel it in my chest. When you sing, and all my fears are put to rest. Wondrous thing that I can stand and sing. 'Cause when I fall to my knees, you're the one who pulls me up again. What a mystery that you notice me, and in a crowd of 10,000, you don't miss a thing. You don't miss a thing. When you sigh, the wind becomes a sonnet. When you laugh, the storm around me ceases. You whisper, all my enemies are scattered. You surround me with angels on assignment. Wondrous thing that I can stand and sing. 'Cause when I fall to my knees, you're the one who pulls me up again. What a mystery that you notice me, and in a crowd of 10,000, you don't miss a thing. You see everything. Oh, I am seen and I am known by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. There's no place I can go, your love wouldn't find me. No place I can hide that you don't see. Place I could fall that your love wouldn't catch me. 'Cause you see it all, you see it all through the eyes of love. There's no place I can go, your love wouldn't find me. There's no side to hide that you can't see. No place I can fall, your love wouldn't catch me. 'Cause you see it all, you see it all, you're in everything. be like you. Come and see me, come and know me, come and search my heart and make me new, make me new. I wanna be just like you.
Hello, Church Online. My name is Cody. I'm the lead pastor at Grace Gate Community Church. And for the last few weeks, if you didn't know, we have been in this partnership, this bringing together of two churches as one for all of our services, our events, and our teams between Grace Gate Community Church and Journey Church in Redmond. And it has been a great adventure for me. And I know many of you guys are feeling that out and leaning in to see what God would say. And I just encourage you to continue to do so. Last week, Pastor Luke started something that I love. He started our beginning of our year with 21 days of prayer and fasting. And if you haven't joined into that, it's not too late to start. I personally love seasons of prayer and fasting. I'm hungry right now, and it's not that I like to be hungry or that I like to suffer or like to miss out on some of the things that I enjoy when I'm not in a season of prayer and fasting, but I love the clarity that it brings. I love the way that it benefits my soul, that it uplifts my spirit, that it realigns my body. I love the time set apart to just spend time with God in praying and seeking Him and hearing from Him, and I hope that you're getting to enjoy that as well. Pastor Luke also started something last week with a new series called the Faith Challenge. And how many of you know that faith is sometimes a challenge? And so when we're diving into this message, I want to bring a perspective that might be a little bit different. Faith is a challenge, but oftentimes faith is a challenge because our focus is challenged. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And before we jump into that, I want to just give a little bit of a definition of faith. I have a personal definition of faith. It's what I've been working on after 20 years of studying this in the scriptures and seeing this applied in life. And each time I go back through and study the idea of faith, this definition just gets deeper and deeper as it's reinforced inside of my heart and inside of my life. But this is the way that I would define faith. It is the response of trust. You see, most people think about faith in our culture. We think about faith as believing something. But this is a way to rethink faith in the terms that I just described that is beyond belief. Because what happens is, if I look at this pulpit that is sitting right here in front of me, and a friend comes and tells me, if you lean on that pulpit, it'll hold you. I can believe that and have it not be faith as the Bible describes it. I can believe that what he told me is true and it not be faith as the Bible describes it. It's not faith as the Bible describes it until I lean on that pulpit. When I lean on that pulpit, it becomes faith, because faith is the response of trust. It is the outward behavior of leaning into the unknown because I trust the one who said it. Now, there are two ways of looking at faith, and oftentimes we get stuck in our faith because we apply the first one, which is misplaced faith, and we miss the second. The first one is if my friend says to me, faith, you can have faith that pulpit will hold you up. And I take a step back and I look at it and I evaluate the structures of it. I look at the welds, I look at the way that it's constructed and say, you know what, I believe that. That is not faith. That is me having a confidence in my evaluation of a circumstance. That's not faith. Even if somebody tells me that I can trust it, as soon as I lean on it, it wasn't faith if I did it as an evaluation of whether or not I believed it can hold me. Faith, as the Bible describes it, is the act that I take to lean on the pulpit, not because I trust the pulpit's integrity, but because I trust the one who told me I could lean on it. And that's such an important thing that we're going to look at today. Because when faith is challenged, it becomes greater faith. Oftentimes, we don't like our faith to be challenged because it's hard, it's difficult, it's reaching into the unknown, it's reaching into the unseen, and not knowing how the outcome is going to play out. And that's often uncomfortable, especially when we have to keep walking in faith in the direction that God has set before us, and the circumstance start to experience something shocking or some kind of setback. You don't have to look very hard to find something shocking or a setback. If you're watching on YouTube, just look down in the videos below this one. If you're watching on Facebook, just scroll down that Facebook feed a little bit, and you're going to find plenty to be shocked by or feel like is a setback. And in that moment of feeling the setback, when we believe that we already started out in the path that God called us, when we hit those setbacks, our faith is challenged. Oftentimes, faith is not a challenge when we first hear God speak to us. I want you to do this. I want you to stop doing this. I want you to look at things in this way. I want you to draw near to this person. I want you to forgive in this circumstance. When God says those things, it often doesn't take a great deal of faith to start out on that path. But once we hit the first setback, once we start to come in contact with the shocking way in which circumstances can play out, that's where the faith challenge happens. But when it gets thick, when it gets difficult, when it gets rough, the real faith challenge happens. And that is actually the focus challenge. This is what focus means. Focus is something that happens in our eyes. And you could take this moment right where you're at and look out whatever window is closest to you. And if you look out that window, your eyes are going to pick up everything in a grand view of what's out there. And now I want you to take just a second, and I want you to focus on one thing that you see out that window. Just take a second and look hard at that one thing. Recognize the details, the colors, the shapes, the angles of that one thing out that window. Did you notice that everything else got blurry? The way in which our brain is designed by God is to concentrate its energy on what matters most. So when our eyes are taking in this extraordinary amount of information and our brain is deciphering it, the more intently we look at one thing, the more our brain chooses to blur the rest. The same thing happens with our energy. When we take something we're looking at and say you were to set out after that thing, our bodies would begin to realign, to organize itself to accomplish getting to that one thing. So it forgets the rest in order to obtain the one thing. That is by definition what focus is. And in the challenges of our faith, the real struggle is our focus, not our trust. Because faith is the response of trust. We can still believe in our heart that God is for us, that He called us these things, but our actions begin to change and our faith begins to be misplaced, and we get stuck in the circumstances of our life because our focus gets off of the one who promised and onto the circumstances that we've begun to evaluate. Now, one of my favorite stories about this is in Numbers chapter 13. Would you just turn with me? I know not a lot of people are thinking my favorite book in the Bible is Numbers right now. If you've read the Bible and you've read the book of Numbers, you know what I'm talking about. Enjoy the joke with me. It's a Bible nerd joke. But in Numbers chapter 3, there is a story that is so useful in this understanding of what's happening because it gives us a direct parallel of people who were in the exact same circumstance, who had the exact same upbringing, who heard the exact same circumstances or instructions of God, and had the exact same anticipation of what they would find. But when they went in, their focus changed, and therefore their outcomes changed. So in Numbers chapter 13, we're going to begin in verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to my people Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." So what's happening here is we have a promise that God was going to give this people this land. And that promise is in the ballpark of 500 years old. That promise was given to their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Abraham. And Abraham was able to impart that promise, that inheritance out of his friendship with God to his son Isaac, his son Jacob. Jacob gave it to his 12 sons. One of his sons went into Egypt, was set there by God to save the whole civilized world at that moment from famine, and as a result, God's grace brings them together in Egypt, and then He brings them out of Egypt into the wilderness through these miraculous circumstances. They wander in the wilderness, learning to trust God and learning to follow Him, and they come to the banks of this place where God has promised them this inheritance just across the river. And He gives them instructions to send some of their trusted leaders to go ahead of them to see what it is they're about to inherit. Now, this is an important understanding. When I say this, it's going to sound obvious. But when we feel it, oftentimes we deny the obviousness of this statement. Our choices matter. Everybody knows our choices matter. But oftentimes, if we're Christians, and if you're not yet a Christian, you probably know some Christians that live this way. When we're Christians, we get into the circumstances of our life, and when the circumstances get shocking, and when we experience those setbacks, we take a step back and we say, what is God doing to me? And oftentimes it's because at some point during the challenge, our focus has gotten off, which leads our path astray. If our path is astray, it's difficult to say, why did God do this to me? If our path is still aligned, it gives us the opportunity to say, God, this is what you set before me. I still trust the one who spoke it to me, and I'm going to still continue in the direction you set before me. So they are in this moment of decision, and their decisions will be determined by their focus. Verse 3, so Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of the men who were the heads of the people of Israel. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go up into the Negeb, go up into the hill country, and see what the land is, whether the people who dwell there in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, or whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. They're coming to a land, and God is giving them the opportunity to see their inheritance. He's giving them the opportunity to see their promise. But many of them, make the decision to, instead of just leaning on what he tells them they can trust, they choose to take this moment to take a step back and evaluate it and see if they believe it will hold them. So what their focus is what they focus on becomes the direction of their lives, and it becomes the measure of their faith. In verse 21, it says they went up and spied out the land, and it gives a whole bunch of descriptions of words that are hard to say. I'm going to avoid them. Verse 23, they came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them. And they also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the people of Israel cut down from them. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran, back on the other side of the river. And they brought back word to them, to all the congregation, and to show them the fruit of the land. So basically what has happened is these leaders of all the tribes of this huge nation of people crossed over the river at the word of God. Now all of these people had the same experience. They grew up in the same period of time. They were discipled by the same documents. They were discipled by the same priests. They were all led for the majority of their life with a pillar of cloud that was the presence of God ahead of them during the day, and a pillar of fire by night. They had had God provide to them water when there was no water in the desert. They had had God provide to them food when there was no food. They'd had God provide to them an aspect of worship and an entire governmental organization of their whole community, which they had no qualifications to provide. They had seen God over a period of years set their life in order with Him as the center, and all of them had the same experience of that life. Yet all of them came back with a very different focus when they went out in this moment of faith. Verse 27, they told him, we came to the land which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. And the Amalekites dwell in the land of Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. But Caleb, one of the guys who went with them, quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Now think about these 4 different points of focus. Every single one of them grew up with the same opportunities. They were sent into the land well-equipped, well-established in their faith, in their community, in what God has done. They have many times before seen God come through for them. And in this moment, they're all having the exact same challenge of faith. Can I just say, if our faith is not challenged, it ceases to be faith. Faith is a response of trust, and this is in essence a relational exchange. The reason faith is a response of trust, the reason we have these complex verses like Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, that says, without faith it is impossible to please God. Now, many of us, when we have these moments where our faith is being challenged, we don't like verses like that. Because we think that this is somehow a performance, that we have to do everything just right, and then God will bless us. And we need faith to do that. So we feel the performance anxiety, we feel all this determination, we get very strivey, we get very self-willed, and we get ourselves stuck because we don't understand that that verse is a relational verse. What God is saying is, I love who you are. I believe in who you are. I know who you created to be. I know that there is a purpose and a plan in my heart for your life, but you're going to have to trust me to get there. You're going to have to trust me as a person the way I love you as a person, and you're going to have to take the steps I ask you to take. If we don't take the steps he asks us to take, we won't get where he asks us to be, because that's the place he wants to live with us. I love what Pastor Luke shared in his message last week when he was talking about the disciples wrestling with this moment of faith and how their facts were coming in contact with their faith. But here's the brilliant thing. If we take a step back and see this, he says, listen, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. You notice he left out the persecution. Notice he missed out the moments that he was going to have to miraculously provide for them. Notice he left out all the places that division would enter into the community. Notice he left out all of those things because he knew that through those things was a great blessing and a great inheritance. But he also knew if he gave them all of the steps that they would take until then, that they would begin to evaluate the circumstances instead of evaluating the faithfulness of the one who called them to walk. And if they evaluated the circumstances, they would shrink back in fear and they'd cease to follow him. Because he's a loving father, he gives us the measure of information that we need. And he says, listen, I've got a good plan for you. I'm a good God. I know how to lead you through this. I know how to protect you. I know how to provide for you. I know how to prepare a place for you. I know how to give you the desires of your heart that you can't yet define. But you're going to have to follow me. And that's going to mean times that you don't understand, that you don't know, that you don't see, that you don't know what to do. But the whole time, all I'll ever ask of you is that you trust me and you follow me. And that's what the disciples did in that story. In this story, some of the people chose to, and they entered into the place where they got to dwell with God in harmony. And some of the place did not. And listen to this, God in his faithfulness still continued to provide for them, to protect them, to remain with them. He did everything he ever promised to them that he would do. And if you're sitting in a moment of your life where you feel like your path has gotten off track, and you feel like God doesn't want to come back to me because I made the decision to go in a different way, you cannot outrun the faithfulness of God. The grace of God is always coming after us. Even when we go the wrong way, he goes after us, calling to us, this is the way, walk in it, because you cannot outrun the faithfulness of our God. So he still went with the people who refused to dwell in the place that he set up to dwell in harmony with them. And as they do this, look at the 4 things that they had the option to focus on. The first one is they had the option to focus on the land that he promised them. They went into something that God told them was good. This is what God said to Abraham, I'm going to give you the land. Didn't even tell him about it. I'm going to give you the land. Abraham passed that on from generation to generation, and they weren't looking at the goodness of the land. They were looking at the goodness of the one who promised it. And yet in this moment, God is giving them the opportunity to have their faith encouraged if they can see what he's showing them. He shows them something that is so beyond their wildest dreams that they come back not describing the fruit, the people, and the cities they were sent to instruct. They come back using terms like milk and honey. Here's what milk and honey means to them. It means that the abundance is so profound that it's abundant in the domesticated places and it's abundant in the wild places. The place of milk is where the sheep and the goats and the cattle live. And you only get milk when cattle, sheep, and goats are healthy. The land is so flourishing that the domesticated places are abounding with their produce, with their fruitfulness. And the wild places, the places that you couldn't make something happen, are filled with honey, flowing with honey. The language is the language of overflow. These people had an opportunity to come back and see that the land that he had promised them was so much more than anything that they could have asked or imagined. That's Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. You want that one for your prayer journal. They come back and they're carrying grapes. You guys, they're carrying a cluster of grapes so big it takes 2 men to carry it. I have never seen a cluster of grapes so big that it takes 2 men to carry it. He gave them the opportunity to focus on the promise that he gave them. He knew they were going to face setbacks and shocking circumstances when they dove into this. He knew they were going to do that. He wanted to give them an additional opportunity of focus. He knew that when their focus came off of them, he wanted them to have another focus to come back to. And that could be the land that he promised them. He could set some vision in front of them and say, you've got good ahead of you if you walk in my ways. The second thing that they could focus on is the enemies who oppose them. Now, this is a rough one. They went into a good place. And all these names that I just read, these are the biggest, scariest, toughest hombres on the block. In this region, these are the people that nobody wanted to quarrel with. They were dark, they were hard, they were scary, they were vicious. They went and they took what they wanted, and they all wanted this land. So they found a way to sort of coexist with small battles between them so that they could all get some of the good of the land and hopefully not kill each other doing it. And so when the Israelites go to look in this and they find the meanest, toughest groups of people in the world who are vicious and don't care to kill you, when they go to find these groups of people, their focus began to focus on those people. Now, a little bit later, we're going to see in the chapter, it says that when we looked at them, we were like grasshoppers in our sight, and we were to them as well. If their focus became on the enemies who opposed them, if their focus became on the place that resisted them, on the obstacles in their path, what happens when we focus on one thing? We begin to blur the rest. So now their focus could not be on the fruitfulness of the land that was set before them. Now, as they focused more and more intently on the enemies and the obstacles, the blurring began to happen of the land they were going into. The third thing that they could focus on came from Caleb in verse 30, the strength within them. Caleb resists this mob, this crowd that is gathering together saying, I know he told us to go, but we can't. And just imagine, just try to empathize with the conflict that is happening in that community in that moment. They're thinking, man, we don't want to see, we know what they've done to the children and to the wives of tribes that they've conquered before. We don't want that for our families. We don't want that. We'd rather live in the wilderness, or we'd rather go back to Egypt than face that. There was a conflict within them because they began to evaluate the circumstances and they lost focus on the one who sent them into it. The more we focus on one thing, the more we blur the rest. And Caleb stands up and he quiets the crowd. He quiets and he says, listen, we should go up at once. We are well able to overcome this. And I personally believe, we don't know what is in the heart of Caleb, but I personally believe that he wasn't talking about their own strength to do it, but he was looking with a bigger viewpoint of all the ways that God had come through with them in the past. He was seeing a oneness between the people of Israel and God, and he's thinking, we, God included, can do this. But in our culture, there's another opportunity for focus right here. Because if we say, we're well able to do this, I sat back and I evaluated the welds on the pulpit, the design of the pulpit, calculated my own weight in the midst of that, and by my own strength, by my own knowledge, by my own ingenuity, by my own sense of evaluation and assessment, I know I can lean on this. They could have lost focus on what was happening in that moment and began to focus on their own strength. No matter what part of the spectrum you're on, maybe you're one of those people that are super confident. You've gone and you've conquered some big obstacles and you've got the trophies to prove it. Or maybe you're on the other side of that spectrum and you feel like you've been a failure for your whole life and you can't accomplish anything. Maybe you're like most of us and somewhere in between those two things. Our own strength can become a point of focus that causes us to blur what God's doing and evaluate everything in front of us based off of a faith in what we think we can or can't do. That's a trap. We cannot fall into that trap. If our focus is on our own strength, our own ability, our own education, our own knowledge, our own finances, our own past or a history or a resume, if our focus is on our own strength, it's going to blur the rest of what God is doing around us, and we'll get stuck in a rut just like they did. That's not what I think Caleb did. I think Caleb was coming into this fourth point of focus. First one, the land promised to them. The second one, the enemies who oppose them. The third one, the strength within them. And the fourth one, most importantly, is the God who sent them. I believe God had a focus on the God who sent them. And it is so easy to lose our focus on the God who sent us, because this is the only one that is faith as the Bible describes it. Faith, as the Bible describes it, is the action that corresponds with trust. And it's not about trusting the circumstances or trusting my ability or evaluating what's happening around me. It's trusting the one who called me to go. And in this moment, Caleb does what we all need to do when we get stuck in that rut, because all of us get stuck in that rut. I've been stuck in that rut multiple times in the last year, where I begin to evaluate what's happening around me and my attention becomes so locked on something that's happening. It happened with COVID. It happened with shutdowns. It happened with politics. It's happened with a number of things where my focus gets so honed in on that it blurs my focus on the rest. The only way to get the focus back is to take a step back, to zoom out and get the big picture again. Because at any point in our life that we zoom out and get the big picture again, guess what? God comes back into that picture. And when God comes back into the picture, there's this settling that starts to happen over our heart. And we can look with honesties and say, you know what, the enemies of the land, they are big. You know what, the obstacles that we have to overcome, they are big. The fruit in the land is great, but that's not what I'm focused on. I trust the one who sent me. I trust the one who called me. I trust the one who loves me. I trust the one who's directing me. And because I trust him, I'll take the steps I don't understand, and I'll enter into the lifestyle of following by faith. Even though the setbacks and the shocking may come, I keep walking because I trust the one who's leading me. This is the fourth one and the most important one. But what if we don't? What if we don't get that focus back? What happens? Look at this next verse, chapter 14, verse 1. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt. Oh, that we had died in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us, listen to the language, why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose another leader to go back to Egypt. There are two groups of people that are distinguished in this moment. This is one big conversation after they come back with a report. And in this moment, there's a distinguishment between two people. One of them is the one who just expressed this. And often, I think we have fallen into this as a people in this moment of 2020 and now the beginning of 2021. In this moment, this is what happens when we start to lose focus. When our faith gets misaligned and our focus begins to get hyper-focused on the wrong things and blur the rest. Here's what happens. We get skeptical about the present, scared of the future, and we romanticize the past. Here's exactly what they did. They looked at the present and they were skeptical. Their focus was on them. Their focus was on the enemies. Their focus was on the obstacles. It had blurred everything that God said he wanted to do. It had blurred all the ways that God had come through for them before. It blurred all those things. And as they're focusing all those things, this fear begins to creep into their hearts. And when it comes into their heart, it makes them extraordinarily skeptical about the present. Do you feel skeptical about the present right now? When someone asks you what you think about things, are the knee-jerk reactions of your own heart, the words that come out of your mouth, are they, I don't know. I don't know how that could happen. I don't think America can get better. I don't know what's going to happen in the church. I don't think this is going to make it. I don't know. The skeptical about the present and scared of the future is a sign. It's a sign to us, brothers and sisters, that our focus has gotten off and our faith is misaligned. But when we zoom out from that, when we stop being so skeptical in the moment, and we start to believe that there are things that God can do right now, when we stop getting scared about the future, and we zoom back for a moment to get a look that God can still bring good out of anything, and we stop romanticizing the past. How often do we romanticize the past? Do we not come out and say, man, I just wish things were the way they used to be? I wish things could be the way they used to be. Did you know that your memory works just like your eyes? When we think back in memory, our brain takes in so much information that it decides what it's going to keep and what it's going to store as memory. When it stores it according to the emotion that we felt. And when we pull that memory back out, we go to a point of focus, we look into the past, we draw our focus to that memory, and we pull the memory back out of that. It takes all the emotion, it has to make sense of it. So it selectively chooses the things that it had collected as information to surround that memory. Did you know that every time you revisit a memory, you change it? Because our brain has the impossibility of pulling the whole packet of information back. It just selectively chooses what it wants to focus on, and then imagination recreates the scenario around it. Every time we look back at the past, I've had a number of these conversations with folks at Gracegate trying to figure out what we should do as we're making this decision. This decision's coming up next week. And they're like, I missed this. And I'm like, did you know we haven't had that for 2 years? Oh, what? I can't believe that. Well, I just love how we were like this. Yeah, we haven't had that for 4 trimesters. Our memory romanticizes the past because it goes back to what we valued, and imagination fills in all the holes. They did the exact same thing. They did it to such a profound degree, that they made a conscious decision to not go to the place that God had called them. They made a conscious decision to disbelieve the promise that He gave them. They made a conscious decision to engage in divisive behavior because they were so scared of the future, skeptical about the present, and romanticizing of the past. How many ways do we do that through COVID? How many ways do we do this after all the election drama of this last week? How many ways do we allow fear and misaligned faith to creep in and redirect our focus and cause us to blur the things that God is actually drawing our hope, our peace, our grace, our joy, our attention to? But listen, not everybody followed that path. Our words matter. And we see in the words of Caleb that his heart was focused on something else. I love the passage in Luke chapter 6, verse 45. It says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If you want an evaluation, because we all need this evaluation every day. If you want an evaluation of how your faith is doing, how your focus is doing, listen to your words and listen to the words of the people around you. There's nothing wrong with pointing out obstacles. God had no opposition to them seeing all 4 of these focus points. His problem was when they hyper-focused on one and blurred the rest. There's nothing wrong with evaluating the circumstances of your life or the decisions ahead of you. In fact, I believe God would encourage you to do so, to evaluate those things, to look at them, to know with honest eyes what they all measure up to. But is God a part of the equation? And if our words reflect, I believe God is still calling me forward. Maybe He's not calling you forward, but I believe God is still with me. He's directing me, and He has a path for me. And I'm trying to navigate it, even though I don't know every step to take. But if our words sound like we can't do this, God has abandoned us, God is not for us, listen to the language. Did God bring us here to make our children, our wives and our children pray? When we get hyper-focused, our perception of God gets misaligned. Our perception of church and mission and community, it gets misaligned. But when we step back and see the big picture and God comes back into focus, when God comes back into focus, we get to reevaluate all the other things that were there. Notice God told them to look for the obstacles, to look for the enemies. He wanted them to see them with open eyes. But when they went in, what did He ask them to do? Be of good courage. Allow your focus to be strong, that you believe my word, that you believe my character that has been proven throughout the duration of your life. Remember to look at these things with honest eyes, but with your focus on the words that I'm speaking to you and the God that I've been to you. This is how we realign our focus. We zoom out and we get God back in the picture, and then we relook at the things of our life with God able to speak to Him, with a good God in the midst of them. But those words can be an evaluation. They can help us to see the difference. There's one person that engaged this in an entirely different way, and this is in Deuteronomy chapter 1. And this is the story of Numbers is the recording of Moses as they're living through these things. But the book of Deuteronomy is my favorite book in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, because it's the book of hindsight. Deuteronomy is after they wander for 40 years in the wilderness, because what happened to them is after this conversation, God speaks to Moses and said, I'm deeply disturbed and disappointed with the decision all those people made to leave me, to leave you, to leave the path I've set before them, and to leave that, they won't get to enter into my promised land. And then he said to others, you will. So what makes the difference? Because God is faithful to remain with us, to be with us in grace, to give us opportunity. He's faithful to do that no matter which direction we go. But there's one that leads to the promise, to the inheritance, to the blessing, to the place that God wants to dwell with us in a greater harmony than we've ever understood. And there's one that doesn't. He said in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 35 and 36, not one of these men of this evil generation shall see the good land that I swore to give to your fathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him and to his children I will give the land on which he has trodden. Because listen to this, because he has wholly followed the Lord. Why such harsh words? This brings us right back to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Why is that? And oftentimes when we're in the challenge of faith and that skepticism is rolling and that fear is rolling and that romanticism of the past is rolling, when all those things are happening, we look at this and we say, how could God say that? Remember, it's all about relationship. The options were this simple. God was saying to them, I want you to come into this land. And I want you to focus more on me, because in this place that I'm leading you, I want to dwell in your midst. I want to grow you. And you cannot grow without faith. You cannot grow nearer to me without faith. You can't come into a greater knowledge of me if you won't trust and follow me in the unknown. They chose to go back to the predictability of what they knew, and they chose to break fellowship with God to do it. This was a relational decision. It was a relational betrayal. Oftentimes we don't think about the decisions of our lives being more relational than they are purposeful. And with God, relationship trumps everything. What he's looking for a people who desire to know and be known by him. Because when we know and are known by him, we come into a relationship where we love and we're loved by him. But oftentimes when he's directing our path, we don't know what to do, so we have to trust and follow anyway. And when we trust and follow anyway, we experience the faithfulness of God. And in the faithfulness of God, we come to see his love for us, and we love him in a greater dimension. That's the way this relationship works. That's why he was so disappointed with one group and delighted with the other, is because one was willing to trust him in the relationship, and he knew it would lead to a greater relationship connection. The other was unwilling, and it was the breaking of the conscious decision to break relationship to cling to predictability. I believe that all of us are in some sort of moment like this. I believe that we're all in this moment, and the invitation of God in this moment is to be like Caleb, to be one who would wholly follow the Lord. I'm not telling you what you should do with any of the circumstances in your life, but I'm telling you the invitation of grace, the invitation of the Spirit is that you would wholly follow the Lord. That means with all that you are and all that you know and all that you don't know, that you would wholly follow the Lord with all of your life. And every moment that you'd wholly follow him. And if you're stuck in one of those ruts where you're focused on the wrong thing and it's made everything else blurry, just take a couple steps back. Get a picture of zoom out of the big picture of your life and look back at the moments that God has been faithful, that God has brought you through. That if you've never experienced something like that, maybe look to the lives of other people who've had the opportunity to live in relationship with him over a greater length of time. I promise you, they have stories of the faithfulness of God coming through for them. And from that zooming out and remembering of his faithfulness, when we remember his faithfulness and we look at those circumstances and then we start to zoom back into what we're facing, we'll look at it with a different focus and we'll walk in it in a different faith. That's my invitation to you this morning. And I want to just take this moment for any of you that have never had that. If you've never had that, that is the invitation of God for you this morning. He wants to lead you in this wild adventure of both known and unknown. He wants to lead you in this adventure of faith that begins to reshape every aspect of your life, every aspect of your thinking and your feeling, every aspect of your behavior and your relationships. He wants to bring himself in and all of the redemption that he brings, all of the restoration that he brings. He wants to come into your life and dwell there with you and lead you through a life of transformation into a sense of identity and purpose and belonging like you've never known. It is the fullness of my life that I believe that to be true, and I want it for you, and I believe God wants it with an imagination that's beyond anything that I could possibly wrap my head around. And so I want to invite you to pray this prayer with me. Not that this prayer makes it perfect, but this prayer is just a step of faith in the direction of making a commitment to follow him. Would you pray with me? Father, I commit to you my life. I commit to you my past. I commit to you my present. I commit to you my future. I put my sins into your grace. I put my future into your faith. And I ask you, God, to receive me into your family name, to fill me with your Holy Spirit, to forgive me of my sins, and to lead me in the way everlasting. I believe if you prayed that prayer, you just took a step of faith like no other that you will take in the rest of your life. Now, the rest of your life may feel like another one of those decisions every moment and every day, but we want to do that with you. Continue to watch online. Continue to do church with us in person if that's something you're comfortable with. But we're going to put a number across the screen up here, and I want you to text the word life to that number because we want to join you in your journey. Nothing in the Christian faith is meant to be done alone. It is a collective walk of life and a new identity. We have our own decisions to make, but we have a group of people who've been through similar life coming into who Christ is to do it together with. So I want to encourage you to do that. For the rest of you, we've got a journey ahead of us. For Gracegate, we've got our big vote coming up this coming Friday, on Friday the 15th. Invite you to come and join us. There's an RSVP that'll help us prepare. We'll have childcare and food. We want you to come, but I want you in the days that lead up to that Friday to take and evaluate what's happening. I'm seeing people all over Gracegate that have had moments where hyper-focus has made it hard, but the Lord is coming back into vision. And this faith is filling our community right now in a way that is so encouraging. It's an excitement that I haven't felt in months as I'm watching people all over our community seeing God in the midst of this and seeing God at work in what's happening and coming to this awareness of how present God has been with us through all of this year and even through this process. So I hope you'll join us for that. For you, all of you as a part of Journey Church, you're walking through your own things. We're getting ready to engage, if that's what everybody has together, to engage this new building together. A new kind of grand opening is coming for us in the future. And so there's so much opportunity to jump into both the known and the unknown and see how God would lead us and prove himself faithful in our lives. The only way to experience the faithfulness of God is to walk by faith. And the only way we can walk by faith is we're constantly evaluating what challenges our focus. So our focus is on him and trusting and following him wholly, like our friend Caleb did. Lord bless you. I'm so grateful for every one of you. I want to thank you for joining me in this message today.
Jesus, have your way in me now. You open up my heart to you. Open up my heart to you now. So do
Well, friends, wasn't that an amazing time together? I tell you that the message of focus is so relevant for today. Even just as we look at what's happened in our nation in this last week, we can look all around and see what are we going to fix our eyes off of. And Cody's challenge and Cody's question of even how do we respond when somebody asks us about how we feel about the present, that indication of where our faith is based on that answer, man, I'll tell you, that got me right where I was at. I want to be known as a person of faith, and I want us together as a church to be known as a church of faith. I want to encourage you, if you gave your heart to Jesus Christ or you made that commitment, we've got that number right there on the screen. Would you connect with us and text LIFE to that number once again, LIFE. We'd love to just join with you on the journey. We say it like this all the time. You didn't arrive at the destination today. You started a journey. We want you to know you're not alone. We also want you to know that we're here to pray for you. If you need prayer, would you connect with us online at our website? We've got a prayer request. You can do that if you can drop a DM on Facebook or leave us a note right here in the comments on YouTube. We'd love to connect with you and pray with you and let you know that we want to go on this journey with you. And if you call Journey Church your home, or if you call Gracegate Community Church your home, we want to encourage you to get involved and participate and engage by giving, by supporting what God is doing here in Central Oregon as the two churches are on the pathway to becoming one, and we're stepping out in faith into this brand new season. It's not the time to pull back. This is the time for us to step out. And so we want to encourage you to give and to get on board and to support what God is doing here. Friends, I can't wait to see you again next week as we have church once again and we continue this series of the Faith Challenge. I know God wants to speak to you. I know God wants to speak to me. So let's press in this week and fix our focus on Jesus Christ, the answer, and not everything else that's going on around us. And we're going to have an amazing season ahead of us as a church here in Central Oregon. Have a great week. We'll see you guys next time.